Daniel delivered the meal, but before he could leave, Amanda shoved him out the door. He fell onto the concrete, feeling the pain of the impact. Unbeknownst to him, a security camera had recorded everything. What seemed like a simple assault was about to reveal a much bigger truth. Daniel was sweaty and exhausted. The 15 deliveries he had made that day felt like 50, with the scorching summer sun in Chicago slowly setting. The feeling of fatigue was familiar, but also a constant that he had learned to endure. When the app on his phone signaled the next delivery, he didn't hesitate. The reward for one more order, the promise of a few extra tips, kept him moving. He arrived at the apartment building in River North, a neighborhood that had become a symbol of the contrast between luxury and the struggles of those who worked in the city. Daniel pressed the intercom button and waited. The wait was brief, but the environment around him seemed to heighten his tension. He was used to the suspicion from some people, the indifferent attitude from others, but he always tried to stay calm. The building's door opened, and a woman appeared behind it. Amanda. He saw her with a tired, irritated look, wearing an expensive brand t-shirt and a pair of sunglasses that didn't match the weather. She didn't say a word as she grabbed the package, simply extending her hand without hurry. Daniel, as always, forced himself to smile, trying to be friendly, but soon realized she didn't seem very willing to engage. "Food delivery," Daniel said, trying to keep a cordial tone. Amanda looked at him, her eyes narrowing. For a moment, it seemed like she was processing some inner frustration, something about to overflow. She took the meal without a smile, without a gesture of gratitude. Daniel thought her reaction was just the reflection of a tiring day, perhaps an argument with her boss or something personal she was carrying. But the scene took an unexpected turn. Without warning, Amanda shoved Daniel out the door, causing him to lose his balance and fall to the ground with a loud thud. Daniel, surprised and with no time to react, tripped on the sidewalk, falling sideways. The impact was hard, but what really struck him was the stigma of being treated like an invisible person, as if his job was just a disposable detail. The pain in his shoulder soon mixed with the humiliation. "Hey, what was that?" Daniel shouted, feeling the blood boiling in his veins. Amanda, however, didn't seem interested. She simply slammed the door shut, leaving Daniel on the ground, without an explanation, without an apology. He stared at the closed door, unsure of what to do. The incident, which at first seemed just another moment of frustration in his job, began to weigh on his mind. That's when the building security guard, who had been watching from the control room, noticed what had happened. In his instinctive reaction, he went to the computer to check the footage from the security cameras. Something bothered him. He knew that without this footage, Daniel would have no way of proving what had happened. Meanwhile, Daniel, still with the sense of indignation on his lips, grabbed his phone and walked away, ignoring the pain in his body and the growing anger. He knew he had to finish his day, but something about the incident wouldn't leave his mind. Something that seemed small but had the potential to become much bigger. The unexplained assault, the public disrespect, all of it bothered him in a way he didn't yet know how to process. Amanda, on the other hand, was in a different state of mind. She moved away from the door, sitting in the living room of her luxury apartment, feeling the weight of the day. What she had just done hadn't calmed her. She was in a whirlwind of emotions, anger, frustration, and maybe even regret. But part of her didn't want to admit that. That unexpected assault had been an explosion, an immediate reaction, without thinking. She looked at the clock, thinking about how the minutes flew by that day, how the problems never left her in peace. But what she didn't know was that that simple gesture, that shove she thought was insignificant, was now being watched, and the weight of her actions was about to multiply. That scene at the door would not be forgotten. Not now, when the building's camera had recorded everything. Night had already begun to fall over Chicago, but for Daniel, the exhaustion seemed eternal. He still had a few more deliveries to make, but the assault he suffered at the door wouldn't leave his mind. The blow wasn't just physical but emotional as well. He knew that what had happened was not a mere disagreement, something casual and without consequences. There was something deeper there, something that Amanda's assault was preventing him from seeing clearly at the moment. As he left the building, Daniel felt the pain in his shoulder and back, but what really bothered him was the impact Amanda's reaction had caused. She didn't even care about his fall. She simply shoved him and slammed the door. That scene, though small and quick, seemed to carry a greater emotional weight than any of the frustrating deliveries he'd had. Daniel's mind was racing, processing everything that had happened. He had been treated like a disposable piece, as if his life was less important than the meal he was delivering. While he was used to the coldness of daily interactions, this was different. He felt there was something wrong here, an inhumane treatment that transcended a person just having a bad day. Meanwhile, the building's security guard, Alan, was in the monitoring office. He was watching the security cameras as part of his routine, but something caught his attention that night. The image of Daniel falling outside Amanda's door didn't seem normal. He rewound the video, watching the scene again, more closely. Amanda's behavior bothered him. She shoved him aggressively without apparent reason. Alan was new to the building, but he knew enough to realize that this was not a common reaction to a wrong delivery or any other trivial misunderstanding. He paused the video and made a mental note that something was very wrong there. What Alan didn't know, and what Daniel would soon find out, was that Amanda's reaction would not be easily forgotten. She didn't realize that the building with its security cameras was about to record the truth behind her aggressive attitude. Alan, still unsure of what to do, wasn't aware of the power that footage might hold in Daniel's hands. Daniel, unaware of all this, tried to move on, but he felt that the incident couldn't just be ignored. He knew it wasn't an isolated case, that there was something bigger here, a reflection of a system that devalued people like him. With a deep sigh, he grabbed his phone and called the building administration. He didn't know exactly what he wanted, maybe just an explanation, maybe an apology, but what happened after his call would change everything. When Alan found out Daniel was in contact with the administration, he hurried to retrieve the camera footage. It wasn't his intention to interfere, but as security, he also had a responsibility to report incidents of an aggressive nature if necessary. He called the administration asking them to check the footage. The pressure was mounting. Meanwhile, Daniel was at a local restaurant eating something quick, trying to regroup before heading back to work. His stomach was still tied up with anger. He watched the city lights through the window, absorbing the frustration accumulated from weeks of underpaid work and a system that always seemed to step on people like him. Then, his phone vibrated. It was a text message from Uber Eats support. "Hi Daniel, we received a complaint about the incident that happened in River North. How was your delivery?" It was a simple question, but he didn't want to be just another delivery driver going through a standard form. He knew this wouldn't be just another delivery problem. Something bigger was at stake now. He replied quickly, his heart heavy. "It was a physical assault. The customer shoved me out of the building for no reason. It's all recorded on the building's security cameras." For a moment, Daniel felt powerless. The feeling of being just a disposable part of the system was painful. He was right to seek justice, but he didn't know if he would be heard. On the other end of the line, the attendant responded quickly. "Understood, Daniel. We'll proceed with the complaint. Do you have any other important details about the incident?" Daniel hesitated. He felt that this assault wasn't just about him and Amanda. It was something bigger, something about the system that disrespected the delivery drivers. He knew Amanda's story needed to be told too. "Yes, I need to know what happened with the cameras. Has anyone seen the footage?" The attendant hesitated. "I don't have access to that information directly, but you can contact the building administration to obtain the recordings." As he hung up, Daniel felt a mix of relief and anguish. He knew this wouldn't end so easily. The assault, though personal, had already become something he couldn't let slide. On the other side of the city, Amanda was unaware of what was about to happen. She felt guilty for her impulsive action, but at the same time, she wasn't willing to accept that the incident would have consequences. Her life seemed too complicated to think about something so small, but what she didn't know was that this sudden gesture was now being observed. Her and Daniel's fates were in an unexpected way intertwined. The camera footage was about to change everything. The sun had completely set, and the night was calm, but the tensions were far from dissipating. Daniel, still absorbed in what had happened, could barely focus on his next deliveries. It felt as though he was immersed in an internal battle, to move on and forget, or to fight for something that seemed small in the eyes of others but gigantic to him. The humiliation of being treated as a disposable object constantly haunted his mind. And there was something even more disturbing. The feeling that no one, not even Uber Eats, would see his side of the story. Meanwhile, the building administration, after Daniel's contact and security guard Alan's intervention, was beginning to analyze the footage from the cameras. It didn't take long for the footage to reach the local media team, who were already beginning to take an interest in what could be more than just a trivial conflict. It was the perfect opportunity to attract attention to the working conditions of delivery drivers, a growing topic in discussions about the working class and the devaluation of labor. In the press room, journalists began discussing the case, already preparing for possible coverage. It was an irresistible storyline: a delivery driver assaulted by a resident in a luxury building, with the support of security camera footage that recorded everything. The narrative was being built, and before Daniel even realized it, the story was spreading beyond the local sphere. Amanda, on the other hand, barely knew that her life was about to be turned upside down. The day had been long and full of frustration, and her impulsive reaction didn't seem to have major consequences. She thought it was just another one of those small misunderstandings, typical of the delivery world. But the impact her gesture would cause was beginning to take shape. She spent the night trying to escape from what happened, until the news reached her. Amanda's phone rang the next morning. It was a friend who, worried, asked if she knew about the report that was starting to gain traction in the city. Amanda, stunned, couldn't understand how her simple action could turn into something so big. Her name was being mentioned in the articles, and the way the incident was being reported was not in her favor. The headlines were simple and direct. Uber Eats delivery driver pushed and humiliated by luxury building resident. The focus was on Daniel, the delivery driver who was now seemingly the victim. But something deep in Amanda's heart made her question, what about her side of the story? Where was her explanation for what had happened? The incident was being distorted. Contrary to how Amanda saw it, as a small explosion of frustration in an already unbearable situation, the public was being led to believe she had acted with total loss of control and cruelty. Amanda's perception was that the system was treating her as a guilty party, without considering the pressures she herself was facing. But the footage didn't lie, and what it captured was about to change everything. The media reaction was swift. Social media began filling up with opinions, some extremely supportive of Daniel, others defending Amanda's perspective, arguing that often deliveries weren't made properly, and that those working on the front lines, like her, often face a level of frustration that's hard to control. Netizens were divided, and the topic was taking on larger proportions. For Amanda, what seemed like a simple defense of her territory, a moment of stress and impatience, now placed her at the center of a public uproar. The most agonizing part was the fact that the building's security cameras had captured everything, making any defense she had much more difficult. She tried to defend herself on social media, but at the same time, her explanation seemed small in the face of the avalanche of reactions that were emerging. Daniel, meanwhile, was receiving support from other delivery drivers, who also saw in this incident an opportunity to expose the difficult and inhumane working conditions faced by those who, every day, put their health and well-being at risk to perform a role that was often undervalued. He received messages, some with words of support, others with criticisms directed at the high levels of dissatisfaction among workers. But deep down, Daniel knew this situation was more complex than any simple public opinion dispute. It wasn't just about what had happened between him and Amanda. It was about how society viewed people like him. It was about the invisibility of gig economy workers, always pressured, always underpaid, and frequently disregarded. That morning, the pressure increased for both. Amanda didn't know how to position herself without seeming like she was minimizing the gravity of her actions. She had been agitated, impatient, but the way the situation was being presented made her feel attacked. All she wanted was some understanding, but instead, she was being pushed into a corner where every move seemed to be observed and judged. Daniel, for his part, didn't want revenge. He wasn't interested in destroying Amanda's life. What he wanted, more than anything, was for people to start seeing what lay behind that incident. The exhaustion of a life of constant work, in a system that saw him as just another cog in the machine. The two were now on opposite sides of the same battle. Society was watching, judging, but no one knew the real story behind that encounter. And yet, the game of blame had already begun. The encounter between Daniel and Amanda didn't happen immediately, but the following days were marked by intense and reflective exchanges of messages. Both were on edge, yet at the same time, there was a sincere desire to understand what had happened. The dialogue that began with Amanda's message offering a sincere apology was only the first step toward the true transformation that was about to take place. Daniel, still cautious, saw in that apology something he never imagined, a genuine attempt at accountability. Amanda, in turn, was starting to see the reality of the person on the other side of the delivery. She had never truly understood what it meant to be a delivery driver. The working conditions, the instability, and most importantly, the disregard often directed toward those people who carried the weight of the city on their shoulders without recognition. What seemed like a simple personal frustration for Amanda now appeared to be a consequence of a series of pressures that she didn't know how to handle either. It was then that they decided to meet. Amanda suggested a coffee, something simple, but both of them needed to sit down and lay everything out on the table. The chosen place was a cozy cafe in a quiet corner of River North. When Daniel arrived, he was still unsure of what to expect, but Amanda's presence there, willing to confront her actions, was already a sign that something had changed. Amanda arrived first and waited at a table in the corner. She seemed more vulnerable than in the messages they exchanged, more human, closer to the person that over the past few days, Daniel had begun to perceive. When Daniel walked in, he hesitated for a moment but soon made his way to the table. They greeted each other with a shy wave, both aware that the words would be heavy. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened," Amanda began, before Daniel could speak. "That day, it's not who I am. I don't know what came over me, but the pressure, personal problems, exhaustion, it felt like nothing was right. When you showed up there, it was like something inside me exploded. It had nothing to do with you. I don't know how to explain it." Hearing her words, Daniel felt a lightness beginning to fill his chest. He hadn't expected ready answers, but there, in that cafe, an honest explanation was being given. What he had always wanted wasn't revenge or accusations, but just to be heard. He wanted Amanda to see what he faced every day without even being noticed. "I understand, Amanda. The pressure is hard for everyone, but you didn't realize what you were doing to me, to the other people in this same situation. Every delivery, every day we're there to serve, but no one sees how much it wears us down. It's not just the work, but the invisibility that hurts us. I'll never know what you go through, but just the fact that you're here, listening and trying to understand, that already changes everything," he replied, calmer than he imagined. Amanda lowered her head, in a gesture of empathy that Daniel couldn't help but notice. What had started as an incident of anger and frustration was transforming into a deep understanding between two people who, at first glance, would never have had anything in common. Both had been victims of a system that treated them as disposable parts. After some time of sincere conversation, an unlikely alliance was being formed. It wasn't a friendship, nor instant forgiveness, but there was a solid foundation of mutual understanding. Amanda knew that for many people like Daniel, that reconciliation was rare, perhaps even impossible. But there, between coffee and words, she felt that in some way she was doing something right. "I know this won't change everything right away," she said, "but I want to try to make a difference. Not just for you, but for all the other delivery drivers who are invisible to society. Maybe I can't change everything on my own, but I want to help." Daniel looked at her, surprised but also moved. He hadn't expected her to commit to something so big, but there was a sincerity in her words that he couldn't ignore. Amanda was trying to do the right thing, and that meant more to him than any apology. In the following days, their story began to take a different turn. Amanda, with her position of influence, used her visibility to speak about the working conditions of delivery drivers. She became an advocate for the cause, participating in initiatives that sought better conditions for platform workers. Daniel, for his part, continued his daily struggle, but now with the awareness that his story had touched someone, and in some way, he felt that despite the pain, he had also helped change something. Although both knew their lives would follow different paths, the meeting and transformative conversation between them left a mark. It wasn't a story of revenge or simple confrontation, but a story of growth, empathy, and mutual recognition. The assault, which seemed like the breaking point, became the catalyst for something much bigger, a difficult conversation that opened doors to understanding. The incident between Daniel and Amanda didn't remain just in their memories, but also in the minds of all those who, throughout history, had observed from a distance but we're now beginning to understand the complex realities of the modern working class. If you also believe that understanding and respect are essential for change, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Every like and subscription is support for more stories like this to be heard. Don't forget to share this video. Change starts with each of us.